Hello everyone. This is quite the pivot, I'm sure you've probably noticed, but it is a 180. But I wanted to talk about this because as I was learning about it, I was like, this would make for a really interesting video. Because when I looked it up, and I'll tell you how I looked it up and why I looked it up and like what led to this, I noticed that everyone was asking the same questions I was asking. Like, what about this? What about that? And you're probably wondering what that this and that is. We're gonna get into that. But first, let me tell you what Kemeticism is, okay? Kemeticism is the ancient Egyptian belief in ancient Egyptian gods. And you might be wondering, well, why does that matter? Well, yesterday, I played a game called Assassin's Creed Origins for the first time. And it got me thinking. There is a line in that game where it says, "We will cut his heart out so he will not know the afterlife." And that got me thinking. Because I've read the Book of the Dead before, and I know how it works. The ancient Egyptians would mummify their bodies, and they would bury themselves in tombs. So that got me thinking, right? So what do they do now? Because I knew this existed. I knew people still followed this thing. It's kind of like a pagan thing now. It's not pagan, but it's like a pagan type of faith. You understand what I'm saying? Like a blanket term. So as I was looking into it, I was like, this is really complicated. So I wanted to make a video discussing it so I could share it with you guys. So that way, I wouldn't be the only one who knew this, because a lot of people were asking the same questions I was asking. Do people get mummified nowadays? How has the faith changed? Who follows the faith? That sort of thing. So that's what we'll be talking about today. And I know the gameplay footage in the background is Assassin's Creed Origins. I just couldn't think of anything more fitting. That's what led me on this path, and I think it's a pretty cool game. So while we will be talking about it is a serious topic, but it's also something, I don't know, interesting. I thought this looked fitting, to go with it. So the first thing we'll be talking about. So the nature of modern Kemeticism and the nature of old Kemeticism, I'm going to refer to it between old/ancient Kemeticism or ancient Egyptian religion. I don't know if that's what it was called back then. I just want to keep it as simple as possible, but also give you the details accordingly. I'm not going to act like I am a genius in this field. I am just learning about it as I'm reading this. Well, not reading this, as I'm recording this, and I just want to share it with you guys. Okay? So, revival versus reconstruction. That is the first bullet point. Ancient Egyptian religion, also known as ancient Kemeticism, if you're lost already, ended around the 5th to 6th century CE. I think, yeah, CE. That's right. I was making sure I wrote that right. This is my first time doing a video like this. But modern Kemeticism is a reconstructionalist or revivalist practice, blending historical knowledge with modern spiritual needs. So it is, by all means, a revival. As you saw in one of my screenshots I showed of when I was trying to look into it, this is a revival religion, but it's also changed, as one would expect. The diverse expressions of this religion are many and also few at the same time. I'm not sure how to describe it as, but listen, I'm doing my best here. Some are strict reconstructionists, aiming to practice as closely as possible to ancient ways. Others are more eclectic, blending with Wicca, paganism, or modern occult practices. So Wicca would be things like altars, the statues. I know Wicca has the horned one, which is the tune-horned god, the duality god, and then of course we have the most common one, which is the triple goddess, I think she's called. Something like that, and it's 3 different goddesses for 3 different phases. And the Wicca lore is really interesting. But as you would expect with all of these type of neo-pagan beliefs, there's going to be multiple different versions of it. And the funny thing is, when I was researching this, I wanted to actually interview people who practice it, because I knew there were communities for it. I made an introduction for them. And as I'm recording this, I found out I was kicked from these communities after giving my introduction. I wasn't rude or anything. I just think that they thought I was a troll when I don't think they understood that I was being serious. I wanted to make a video about this. So, I don't know the specifics. By all means, I don't know how much they change. I know it's individual per person. It's a different path for everybody. But it seems to be the case that they will either be really Reconstructionist and like really want to stick with what it was, or they will mix it up with modern changes, and that's totally chill. I mean, that's happened to other faiths throughout the world, and I feel like that's definitely fine. I want to know more about it, but I can't share anymore because I don't want to talk out of my ass. You know what I mean? So, it's also community-based. No centralized priesthood like the temples of old. So, like, no giant... While they have, like... It's kind of like... This is a terrible example, but a great example at the same time. So, you guys know the Necrons and Warhammer? How they have different dynasties? It's kind of like that. Each dynasty is different. Each dynasty has its own, like... each community, at least, has its own structure, has its own... the ideas, like some of them are Reconstructionist, some of them aren't. And that is also really cool because, again, it diversifies it. So if there ever is one day, like whenever there's a big book or like some kind of combination of all of it, there is a little bit of everybody in there. It adds to the uniqueness of the faith, I believe. But as I said, instead, modern Kemetic groups are often small communities, online spaces, or solitary practitioners. Now, the online space is the one I tried getting into. It was like a Discord server, but like I said, I didn't get the chance to interview them. If anyone happens to see this that is in the server and my introduction is still there, please comment. I want to know more about it, and I would love to interview you. I will make another video about this. So, essentially, how modern Kemeticism compared to the old Kemeticism or ancient Egyptian religion. I'm not going to keep doing this. Instead of structured temples and big followings, it is now smaller pockets and groups throughout the world. I want to say mostly in America, because that seems to be where a lot of these neo-pagan things are followed. I mean, especially after Aleister Crowley and the writing of the Book of Shadows, and Wicca was institutionalized as a modern religion. It was like accepted by the court or something. It's mostly, I believe, an American thing, but I'm not going to say that 100%. However, even though that is the case, there are plenty of smaller, I want to say dynasties. I'm going to call them dynasties because I feel like that's pretty fitting. They're like little groups. They vary in sizes. I know that for a fact. I've seen the two communities and they were completely different, but it changes for everybody. And, that's something I thought was pretty cool. So, while modern Kemeticism is, not as structured, it still has its roots, and I feel like this is very important to talk about as we go on later in the video. This might seem like a rant or like me not knowing what I'm talking about, but I'm setting this up in a way, we're having a conversation first of all, and second of all, I'm setting this up in a way to where whenever I say the next things I'm going to say, the next chapters, it will change person to person. Other people will have their own thoughts, and I would love to know in the comments. I would love to learn more. I would love to make more videos about this topic. But as of right now, let us now move on into faith and practices then versus now is quite the leap in time, in my personal opinion. Well, that's not even my personal opinion, that's just how it is, but also my opinion in the sense that while things have changed, a lot of it also stays the same. This probably doesn't make any goddamn sense, but we'll get into it later. Okay, so ancient Egypt, we're going to start with ancient Egypt, how it functioned. And it was a state religion. It was heavily tied to the pharaoh, who was seen as divine intermediary. Now, obviously, if we're looking at it from the, normal stance in modern Kemeticism, there is no pharaoh. Authority is decentralized, individuals act as their own priests or join revivalist groups like Kemetic Orthodoxy, which is also known as the House of Netger. However, I would also like to state that doesn't mean individual dynasties won't have their own rules. I don't know how it works, but I know that with some of the Hellenic groups, they will have a centralized oracle based on their small little faction. And I don't mean that in a demeaning way. I mean that it could be the same way with them. I do not know as of right now. I just want to say the possibility because I know it exists elsewhere. And like I said, I will love to do interviews to know better. So, back then, they had temples and priests. Worship was mostly carried out by temple priests, not everyday Egyptians, though household shrines and ancestor cults existed. Now, I would like to say, I don't mean cult in a bad way. It is just the term, the best term I could use. It's not a bad cult kind of thing. There's plenty of cults around the world. But nowadays, instead of, the temples and priests, it's personal devotion. Modern protection. Ugh, I can't even say that word. I'm sorry. Modern practitioners. That's what I meant to say. I don't know why I'm struggling with that. Often keep small shrines at home with candles, statues, and offerings, such as food, incense, water, etc. It can be anything. I have personally seen many shrines, not Kemetic shrines, but I've seen plenty of shrines, and they can change. It's kind of, like a, no, it's not a, it's like, for those folks, it is a centralized part of the household. It's very important. So it is, in a sense, kind of like a temple, but not an entire building dedicated to it, and there's not one person dedicated to it, etc., etc. So, back then, there was ritual precision. Worship required exact rituals, offerings, and formulaic recitations. Mistakes could invalidate the act. So, like, very specific guidelines, very specific rules, all that sort of stuff. Now, that is kind of the same now, but it's broken down into two different parts. See, nowadays we have flexible rituals. Precision is respected but not mandatory. Intent and connection matter more now than perfect repetition. And I think that's because, again, it's changed so much. It's individual groups, so it's not always going to be the same. And I think that's why it's like that. And also, festivals are reimagined, because back then they would have festivals for gods. Nowadays, it's like some revive ancient feast days, others adapt Egyptian themes into modern pagan calendars. This includes things like the sabbats, the equinoxes, that sort of stuff. You know what I mean? The AC just kicked on. Fuck, it scared the hell out of me. Festivals and calendars. Large-scale, state-funded rituals tied to agricultural cycles, flooding of the Nile, and the solar year. So, like, that was a big thing. Obviously, if you were in history class, you'd know the Nile was a very big part of it. But nowadays, it's a household focus. Many emphasize a personal relationship with gods and ancestors, echoing domestic cults of old, but with modern sensibilities. Again, I had a little help writing this script. We just used the word cult, not in a demeaning way. I'm just letting that know right now. But if you really think about it, it has become more accessible, I believe. Because now, not everyone's going to be near a river that they can celebrate with. Having some sort of household rituals or festivals in a modern or traditional way is a great thing. And I think that definitely would preserve it. Now, I don't know the specifics. I know that there are individual festivals for individual gods. There's harvest festivals. There's plenty of rituals that would need to be completed and plenty of rituals that need to be done. But it can change, person to person. Which brings me to what led me down this path in the first place, was the quote about the heart. I wanted to know about. On a much similar note, much like the chapter before this, we will be going back and forth between then versus now. And the afterlife is what really led me down this path. Because that got me thinking, like, no way people are, like, getting mummified, right? That would cost a fuck ton of money nowadays. I don't think that's even, like, I don't know if that sort of burial practice is even legal. I don't know. I didn't know. I wasn't sure. So it's like, how do they do it now? Because getting into I think it's called the Land of Reeds. I'm not sure. I might be getting that mixed up. The Reedlands, the Fieldlands, something like that, and the Mott. I think it's called Mott. I'm not sure. Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, we're learning together. But the afterlife then versus now was very different. See, in ancient Egypt, they had Mott and Judgment. This is basically like the heart. Remember, Anubis would weigh the heart and the feather. The heart was weighed against the feather of Mott. A light heart meant immortality in the field of reeds. Not the land of reeds, the field of reeds. I'm sorry. However, in modern Kemeticism, the symbolic Mott is still central, but viewed more as a living ethically and in harmony with cosmic order than light heart weighing. So it's kind of like I don't want to compare it in a way that would offend anyone, because again, I'm trying to be as respectful as possible when making this. But you guys know how in some Christian texts you have the 7 deadly sins, and if you are free of sin, then you will find yourself in heaven. It's kind of like that, as far as I can understand. They have these, again, it's different per household, but they have guidelines and rules on things you should follow and things that you will need to expedite of yourself or excommunicate of yourself, kind of like, forgiving yourself for your sins, so that way you can get into the land of reeds. Instead of having your heart weighed, it is judgment based on you as a person. I think the reason for this is because, again, you need your heart whenever you're being mummified. I believe how it worked is they would take everything out of you, and then it would be symbolic of it being weighed and judged. Nowadays, it seems like you are simply judged on what you are. You understand what I mean? Instead of your individual pieces that make... I'm not sure. I don't know if Anubis is still the judge. I'm sure it's different for everyone, like I said. And I will make more videos about this for individual dynasties. But back then, there are funerary texts. Now, I love the funerary texts. The Book of the Dead is one of my favorite among all of them. There's coffin texts, which are like the things written on the coffins, and the pyramid texts offered magical spells to guide the souls. Nowadays, there is no need for mummification. Modern practitioners don't embalm bodies or fill tombs. Instead, ritual, remembrance, and personal spiritual practices are seen as guiding one's soul. So, they still have funerary texts. I know for a fact the Book of the Dead is still something very important. I know that for certain. And nowadays, it's used more as a guide or somewhat as if like a lore book or kind of like a Bible in a way. Again, not to compare, to be rude, but it's kind of like that as far as I can understand. I believe the Book of the Dead is something that is used to this day, but instead of for mummification rules and all that stuff, it is used as a guide, and I'm sure everyone has their own grimoires. I'm sure that's a thing, their own practices and rituals, because again, it's neo-pagan. Grimoires are very important. I have a couple myself, just because I wanted to research it. Someone gave them to me. Moving on, we have funerary preparations. Back then, mummification, tomb goods, and offerings were essential for the afterlife journey. It is true that some Egyptian pharaohs would fill their rooms with small figurines so they would have an army when they went into the field of reeds. I keep wanting to say the land of reeds, the field of reeds. But now it's spiritualized texts. The Book of the Dead is often read symbolically or ritually, not as a literal survival guide. I don't think it was ever a survival guide, but that is kind of just a comparison I'd like to make. The Book of the Dead, the one that I read, has more of how the land of reeds works back then, the process of it, the gods that live there. It talked about Osiris, that sort of stuff. Nowadays, it's more as a ritual sort of thing, a grimoire, as I've said before. If you don't know what that is, it's a book of spells, basically. That's the best I can explain it to someone who doesn't know. Back then, social status mattered. Elaborate burials were for elites, but even commoners had modest afterlife protections. It depended on their money and shit. But then, you'd have elites like royals, pharaohs. They would have all kinds of crazy stuff. Nowadays, very inclusive afterlife. I will say, this is a dumb joke. I'm not gonna. You know what? I'm not even gonna make that joke. I was gonna say something like, "Man, the employee benefits must be crazy." But then I was like, nah, that's not gonna stick. Inclusive afterlife. Many believe the gods are more accessible now, so afterlife entry depends more on personal devotion and living by mot than wealth or social rank. Because I'd like to say, Greek mythology was like this. Well, not mythology, Hellenic belief. And others have been like this, where the gods are very much human. Like, they act human. I know especially in Shinto, you got Susanoo and all that. Loki, they're tricksters. All of them act very human. And they have human aspects about them. I can imagine that they would change just as much as the faith in the people who follow them would change. And that's how change works, that we're all supposed to change eventually. So the fact that it would adapt would make sense. I feel like that is the most important thing about it. Which brings me, as I stated, the gods. It's a perfect segue into our next part of this journey. The gods versus what they were, compared to now, will 100% be different. As Egypt itself was in its ancient state, it went through many eras and many cultural changes. That is with any country. I mean, look at America, compared to what it used to be, compared to what it is now. Things change over time, and so too do the gods, as far as I understand. I feel like that makes the most sense. and also because of what I've read. And I'm now going to share that with you all. We will be doing, again, the then versus now sort of thing. So, back then, worship varied regionally. You had Amun of Thebes, Ptah of Memphis, Ra of Heliopolis, Heliopolis? I think that's what it is. Yes. But nowadays, it's universal access. Anyone can pray to the gods directly without temples or priests, and it's not localized. I would also like to state, and I would like to make... This is going to sound a little confusing, so I'm going to make a modern comparison people will understand. In Dungeons and Dragons, I know, we're off to a terrible start. There is the Warlock, and the Warlock has patrons. Nowadays, that's the sort of thing. Many modern Kemetics have parent or beloved deities who guide them, much like patron saints, or like patrons for warlocks, that sort of thing. And I would make that comparison even more so because some Kemetics draw their, spiritual practice from these gods. So that makes the most sense to, that's the best way to it. Not the best way to it, the best way to explain it. I'm dyslexic as hell, I'm sorry. So, gods merged, such as Amun and Ra, or shifted in importance depending on the dynasty. Now, I'd like to state that there were many times throughout Egyptian history where some gods were replaced with one god, some gods were changed around. And I remember for a lot of times that was not approved, they did not like that back then. But nowadays, it's a fluid understanding. Gods are often seen as both distinct beings and manifestations of larger cosmic forces. Netjur is unity behind all. So it's sort of a, yes, Amun Ra does exist, it is the combination of both of them. It's kind of a, again, it depends on the person you ask, as far as I can understand. So nowadays it's back then it was distant divinity. Access to gods was often through priests or the pharaoh. But nowadays, it's modernized, such as gods are sometimes interpreted through contemporary values. For example, Sekhmet as goddess of activism and justice, Thoth as a patron of technology and learning, Hathor as empowerment and self-love. Their meanings will change as the times change, just as they did back then, just as they do now. Honestly, I think it's perfect that Thoth is the patron of technology, given the symbolism technology companies use these days anyway. It makes the most sense to me. And also because I feel like Thoth would be a very big Sea of Thieves fan. I think he would like Sea of Thieves. I'm not even saying that to be rude. I genuinely think if there is someone, give him Sea of Thieves. Tell him it was from Toll Warden. It's my gift to him. Okay, I'd love to know how that goes. Again, not trying to be rude. That might have come off as rude. I'm joking. I'm sorry. Anyways, nowadays it's I keep getting it confused. Fuck. Back then it was polytheistic and pragmatic. Egyptians could honor many gods at once without conflict. But nowadays it's global. Some practitioners mix Kemetic gods with deities from other pantheons. Greek, Norse, Hindu, Wiccan, which could have been unusual in ancient Egyptian times. So, while I think that is pretty good, omnism is definitely a very big modern thing for a lot of these practitioners. I am of the personal belief that it should be one pantheon. That is just my thought process because that's easier for me to understand. And again, it's the subject I'm talking about, so I feel like it would make the most sense for that, if that makes any sense at all. But now, of course, we have to get into, now that we've talked about all that were my points, by the way, I kind of sped through these, we have to get into the final part of this. As I am recording this, a flock of geese just flew over me. It was kind of crazy. I haven't seen them leave yet, but it was a big fucking flock. You know how they do that big V shape and they just fly away? It was loud. I was like, what the hell is coming? I look up and there's just a horde of them above me. That doesn't matter anything to what I'm talking about. I just think it's kind of coincidental. But anyways, we're now talking about the challenges and changes. This is the summary kind of end part of the video. If you did like this, and if you want to see me do more of this, I just want to say it right now so I don't have to say it later. Leave a like, subscribe, tell me what you think, just the YouTube stuff, okay? I'm definitely going to do more of this, and I want to be informed, okay? So, One of the first challenges is the loss of temples. Without monumental temples, worship becomes more private and symbolic. While this can be a good thing, actually, you know what? I think that is a good thing because centralized powers never seem to end well for these sort of things, and having different individual dynasties definitely works. Now, my personal thought is that they should kind of work together. That's my belief anyway. I don't understand it fully, but if you ask me, I think that there should be cooperation. There shouldn't be centralization, but kind of just like a meeting sort of thing. We are in an era of technology. Nowadays, you can talk to anybody. There is a way for these groups to talk to one another and to get to know one another and to form a sort of republic kind of sort of thing. You know what I mean? And of course, we had the House of Netger, and while that is centralized, I feel like a lot of people don't go towards that as far as I've seen. I could be wrong. I could fucking blast me if I do, if I am wrong. But I feel like the loss of centralization has helped the thing, helped the faith ever since it started. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of neo-pagans that do follow it. The neo-pagans I've met have tons of stuff for it, and that's just that's my personal take. Okay? I could be wrong. The next thing is interpretation gaps. We don't know every detail of every ancient ritual, and we also don't know every modern ritual. So modern cosmetics must reconstruct or invent where sources are missing. I also believe that if it is something that is not possible, you should change it. But it's kind of like a Theseus ship sort of thing. Is it the same ritual? Well, if the gods have changed, then I believe the rituals should change for them as well. Their needs will definitely be different, but that's just my take. Modern ethics, of course. Ancient Egypt had all kinds of fucked up things, and this is not a challenge. This is a very positive change. Nowadays, it is not used to rule over anyone, and it's not used as a sort of crazy fucking dynasty, not dynasty, but monarchy sort of thing, crazy ass class division, all that kind of stuff. Nowadays, it's a very good change because now you can reinterpret the mat for equality, social justice, and inclusivity. And I think that's totally what they would want. Because if you remember, they've always been about justice, but the term for justice has definitely changed over time. And of course, the afterlife emphasis shift. Sorry, not ship, shift. Modern focus on how to live in harmony with Matt than on burial preparations. And I think this makes it all very beautiful. Sorry about my pause there. It makes it very good because instead of focusing on your death, how you want to be buried, you should live your life and do what you want, but also live by the ethics that you believe in. That will definitely make your life a lot better, and worrying about the end will just waste a lot of time. So I think that's a very positive change. It's not a challenge at all. Now, I should say, modern Kemeticism is less about exact reconstruction and more about rebuilding relationships with the Netgeru, which are also known as the gods. I learned that. Netgeru is an Egyptian word for gods. I was not aware of this. Living ethically in line with the Mat and adapting ancient traditions into modern, accessible forms of devotion. It's a living faith, not just a museum piece, and I feel like that could be said for a lot of them. So, ladies and gentlemen, while this was a short video, you might think it's a little sloppy. I'm sorry. I would like to say I'm sorry. This is my first time doing something like this, but I will make more about this. So if you're in a dynasty or community, or if you're just someone by yourself, please come talk to me. You can leave a comment. If you have a server, I'd love to join it. I'd love to get to know more about you. And I'd love to talk about your dynasty and put the information out there, so that way I'm not the only one who's wondering how it works. I would like to also thank, and this is going to sound fucking crazy, I'd like to thank Ubisoft. I know why the fuck would I thank them? But because of their game, it led me down this informational path. And I'm going to keep playing it. I really like it. I love it a lot, and I'm really interested about this now. I've never been really interested in that sort of thing, but nowadays, after learning all this, and now that I have a YouTube channel that I'd like to really grow, I would love to know more about it. I would love to. It's something very cool and something I respect a lot. So again, thank you for being here. Thank you for going through this with me. And I hope you have yourselves a wonderful day tomorrow. Or a better day today. Your day might not be good today, but that's fine. There's always tomorrow. So ladies and gentlemen, I'll be seeing you in the next one. Goodbye.